So this lecture is the city as an organism. Just to orient ourselves, most of what we do in architecture is the first concept, city as a cosmos, or in a more familiar set of terms, the city preconceived as a large formal system. And we are so good at the conceptual diagram thing, aren't we? This is what we do better than anybody. We come up with a concept, we represent it as a diagram, we build it. Done. Mission accomplished. This is what we are so good at to a fault. The biggest problems of the 21st century are a result of the solutions, the fantastic mission accomplished, the fantastic job we did at building conceptual diagrams in the 20th century. It was brilliant. The big turn that we have faced and been forced to make is to go from the conceptual diagram that we impose on the world very successfully with great benefits, health, wealth, all of that, happiness. But there are unintended consequences of planetary death. So we don't really have the option to just do that. It doesn't mean we stop doing that. The conceptual diagram will always be with us. It is always one of our most effective weapons to make a difference in the world. But it's not enough in and of itself, and it causes great problems. The next thing we need to do is understand systems. How do systems work? That is the city as a machine. Regardless of what the larger conceptual diagram is, we have to take care of the interplay between our urban systems. The transportation system, the grid systems, the topography, the natural systems, drainage, oceans, the ecology, all of these systems have to work and play well together. And it takes incredible depth of understanding to manage those systems. But we have that knowledge. The question is whether we have the skill to bring that into our design processes. That is the big struggle the world seems to be aware of. Now, far off the distant margins of architectural practice, there's a group of people playing with the third thing, which is the city as an organism, and more commonly known as the phenomenon of emergence. Architects are now increasingly aware of and sensitive to the phenomena that are characterized by emergent conditions. It's not a conceptual diagram that we conceive in our heads and impose on the world. It's not even a systematic thing where large systems impose their own geometries. It's tiny systems. They're so small that we may not be aware of them. We start by calling it chaos. We start by calling it a mess. We start by calling it abject failure, poverty, misery, absolute catastrophe. But slowly and surely, we call it nature. We call it natural. It seems to be beyond understanding. There is nothing there to be understood, and we call it chaos. But increasingly, starting with mathematics, as is often the case in the chaos theory, in the chaos we find patterns. And so the swarm phenomena, scientists are now identifying patterns within swarm phenomena. It turns out that locusts behave the way they do because they are cannibalistic. They eat each other. So if you're worried about the locust behind you eating you and you're trying to eat the one in front of you, the net result of that life and death, moment of truth behavior manifests as a larger pattern that is beyond the comprehension of any single locust. Remember, locusts are stupid. They're dumber than us. And yet, they seem to be guided by some larger intelligence. Why do fish move in schools as if there is some divine deity with a conceptual diagram about what they should do, directing their behaviors? Is God telling them what to do? Are they being directed by the kingfish? No. Individually, each fish is simply trying to avoid running into the other one, and they don't want to be eaten, so they cluster together. And it manifests in this larger pattern that appears to us, the masters of conceptual diagrams, appears to us to be a conceptual diagram. It is not. It is something that we might be tempted to call organic or natural, but both of those words are like black cloaks that cover up the true nature of the phenomenon, which is better captured in the word complexity. Sometimes it is so complex we cannot understand it, but that doesn't mean there is nothing there to be understood. The best example of this is Islamic settlement patterns that we have available. So we're going to focus in on Islamic settlements. We're probably going to start and end with Islam because we don't have time, but keep in mind that Islamic cities is the example that actually is applicable to a methodology of understanding that we can apply to the slums of the world, informal settlements that we will get to at the end of the semester, and multiple other phenomenon that we think of as chaotic or organic or natural somehow. So who's Muslim? Okay. So I'm not Muslim, but I'm going to do what architects do. I'm going to speak empathically. I'm going to say, in Islam, we do this. And Islam, we do not. We do that. Paul will correct me when I misstate things or overgeneralize. And there's lots of overgeneralizations when you deal with something in the 4 remaining minutes. So here's an Islamic settlement, and it is chaotic, and it is natural, and it's organic. Or is it? Maybe it's actually complex. Do you see any patterns in here? Okay, Smartboard, draw this on the file as I draw it with the marker. Go. I don't think that's going to work. So this is not generated by any conceptual diagram. Oh, there's a straight line. That's a conceptual diagram. So that's a big pattern. But the rest, what is going on here? And do you see this? What is this? Is it a void space? From our point of view, well, what are these bumps? Do you see the bumps? These bumps are domed roofs. So what is that? We don't know. Well, we do know. But, and then what's this? That seems to be something. This seems to be more of this, right? So if we had Photoshop open, we would do something like this. None of this is being recorded because I don't think the smart board is doing what I asked it to do. I've never used one before. But someday that will record on the video. So what's happening here is the natural, and I apologize for continuing to use that word, but it's the direct outcome of the laws of Islam, of the expectations of social engagement. In Islam, what do? We build houses that look out, and if we're wealthy or we are willing to drive ridiculous distances, we surround those houses with buffer zones of lawns and shrubbery. And that's how we manage the relationship between inside and outside as a social engagement, a social barrier. We can't do that here. In Islam, it is improper to gaze upon women. It is improper for men to gaze upon women in certain ways, in intimate conditions in the home. It would be unthinkable and illegal to have windows that allow people from the outside to look in where there are women. It is illegal to look from one rooftop to another. And as a result, our access to light and air in Islam is through the courtyard. And so the courtyard house formation, because of that rule, because of that assumption of social interaction, it forms courtyard houses, courtyard structures, and a roofscape that involves high walls that restrict the visual access from one house to the next. And that results in certain formations that generates these seemingly chaotic, but we're going to say complex patterns. And at the center is the mosque. But the mosque doesn't just go in the center. It goes in the center and orients towards Mecca. And that is considered the direction of Qiblat, which Muslims pray to 5 times a day. And we face Mecca and we pray. And at the same time, we often are facing the graves of our ancestors. And at the same time, beyond the graves of the ancestors, we face the community of the devout, the Ummat. And so some of you are familiar with Lucan's capital for Dhaka and the twist orientation of the prayer hall, slightly off the cardinal points, and we say, that's the spiritual, it's a non-denominational thing, but in order to satisfy the requirements of Islam, it needs to face Mecca. So when we look at the structure of Islamic settlements, we see courtyard buildings, all of the most important structures, the schools, which are called madrasa, and the mosque orient towards the Qiblat. There's the mosque, there's the school. David Macaulay has written about this, down to the details of construction, how the domes are made, why they're made out of masonry, because it's very cheap and easy, and then how these courtyard structures organize the spaces that we experience. In Islam, it's not just about a mosque. It's not like a church where you just put the church and you're done. No, there's, as I implied, there is a school, there's the mosque, there's the courtyard. The Friday sermon is usually the most populated event in a mosque, and so they spill out into the courtyard surrounding. There is the marketplace, which is dictated to be within a certain relationship to the mosque. The marketplace is also a domed structure. Then there is the neighborhood of the true believers that support that. So Islam is, in a way, the most urban social organizing system because it dictates a certain urban relationship that is the key to the social relationships that support the flourishing of Islam. Islam is also a tremendous modernizing force. When it swept through the world, it reconciled tribal differences and brought peace to places that had previously been racked with warfare. You see here a typical arrangement, and we're looking at Isfahan. There's a historic transformation from one mode to another, and these drawings are actually a really powerful demonstration of what architects can do to our understanding of the world. Klaus Herdeg in the 1970s took students from Columbia to Isfahan and several other places and produced these drawings that really unlocked some tremendous mysteries. And I want to just show you a few key examples before dismissing you. Here's a split axonometric. This is a view from above, and this is a worm's eye view. Looking from below, you can actually start to get a sense of the three-dimensional configuration of the vaulting above. And this is the marketplace, and you can see how the marketplace forms in what would be streets. It's a covered marketplace. The marketplace surrounds in the precinct of the mosque the sections of the home, One example, there was a brief moment in time when several cities, I believe this is Riyadh, toyed with reversing this buffer zone thing and creating, by law, a 5-meter setback so that houses could have their windows on the outside. It was a complete and utter disaster, and they immediately reversed it. And so, to this day, the contemporary formation of Islamic cities and what architects do, especially in the housing, is they go back to those laws of the relationship between to respect the privacy of the houses. And we're going to stop it there. Thank you very much.